We're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's stream on Roundabout. We have the wonderful company Lunacy here with us to talk with us. We have Pierce, the writer-director of Lunacy. We have Monique, who's the costume designer of Lunacy. And we have Tom, the creative technologist of Lunacy. As always, we also have Sean, Daniel, and myself here to grill them and find out the juicy goss of Lunacy. How are we all?
I'm fine. I didn't realize this was a goss session. I haven't prepared my goss. I prepared a bunch of intellectual commentary.
I'm not prepared neither.
Just to set it up,
Neither, but I'm sure we'll find some.
So Roundabout is a show being put on with the National Institute for the Dramatic Arts in Australia as part of something called their Digital Theatre Festival. And Lunacy is, in some senses, our sister show, also being put on by NIDA, also featuring weird extra theatrical bits and with perhaps an odd science fiction twist. So they are our natural companions on this road. Pierce, just to start us off, tell us a little bit about the show. What is it, and why is it different from regular piece of theater?
Sure. So Lunacy is a retro sci-fi adventure set in the 1960s about a secret mission to the moon. This is before Apollo. This is a sort of alternate history. And because this is a story, this is not real, it goes horribly wrong. And it goes horribly wrong over and over again in ways that test and expand the minds and realities of the participants, who are a sort of mad scientist, his dedicated assistant, an action hero, and his manipulative fiance. And so it's about these four characters plunging themselves into this mission to the moon and potentially going a little bit mad along the way. And discovering...
Hence the title.
Hence the title. It's, yeah. I think it's important to bring more puns to the theater, starting from the top on down. So I think we've both achieved that with our titles of our shows. So that's one of the things we have in common. And I think that the distinction between this and conventional theater is, firstly, I always say that the problem with theater is that there's not enough laser guns. So we have redressed that from the outset. But like in practical terms, this is sort of one half a live streamed play where we have a built set, we have actors on that set, and we're moving between several cameras, sort of like a live broadcast of a sitcom almost, but closer to theater. It's part that, and then part there are kind of pre-recorded elements that we sort of cut to, hopefully seamlessly, so you don't even realize, and you think it's either all one beautiful film or it's one beautiful, impossible work of theater, in which actors are sort of desperately running between sets as we set up cameras for this live broadcast. But there is also a kind of alternate reality component where in the lead up to the show itself, there's a website that Tom has built, which is sort of building out the world of the show that audience members can go to and interact with, and stuff that they submit to that website eventually potentially becomes part of the live performance.
Love that. $1 million question, is that website live right now?
Yep, you can check it out, www.project-eclipse.com.
Project-eclipse.com.
The goal, Tom, is to see how many times you can casually drop that during this stream.
So drop what? Sorry, was that www.project-eclipse.com?
Yeah, www.project.eclipse.com. Sorry, I just messed that up.
I was trying to that completely.
That's a different Project Eclipse. It's got nothing to do with us. Whatever they're projecting on, it's not us. We maintain no sort of like, wasn't it?
So that's really fun. So there are things, Project Eclipse with a dash in the middle is live right now.
Yep.
And if you wanted to, you could go there right now and start exploring the world of the show, and potentially some of the things that you did or some of the interactions you had could eventually become part of the show. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah. So the sort of conceit of the show is that the members of this mission, the Eclipse mission, are going to the moon because there is an alien artifact there, and it's communicating with them, and it wants to get to know them, and it wants to understand humanity. And it tends to do that by taking the specimens of humanity that enter it to pieces. We all make mistakes. And the website is a chance to kind of understand the backstory of the show, to kind of see how all these things came together, but also as an audience member, as a person, to start having your own interactions with this mysterious figure from beyond the stars that wants to get to know you, that wants to understand you. And so
but because it's a website, cannot disassemble you.
Exactly. So you're perfectly safe. I want to make it very clear that you're perfectly safe. No one will be flayed through the course of interacting with this work.
No, the NIDA official account on Twitch, who we're still not sure is actually an official NIDA account or is someone pretending to be, has said there are a number of forms to fill out, but NIDA supports the safe use of laser guns in productions, and we fully endorse this as Roundabout as well.
Exactly. But yes, the interactions that you have on the website are, you're getting to know the world. There's little snatches of radio drama and video where you're sort of getting to know the characters and how this sort of mad project came together. But you are also starting to ideally share little bits of yourself with the artifact on the moon. And that artifact on the moon is collecting this sort of database. It's building its own database of what humans are like. What do humans like? What do humans hate? What do humans want? What are humans afraid of? And so when our characters interact with it in the show, some of the things that it says to them will be drawn from stuff that audience members provide on the website.
I know from talking to you a couple of weeks ago that it was important to you, like, obviously, the show is meant to be fun. It's meant to be mysterious. It's meant to supply, something somewhere between Doctor Who and The Prisoner kind of vibe. But I also know that you want it to have a chance to make a real emotional connection, that some of the interactions you can have on the website are maybe a chance for people to really engage emotionally in theater in a way that's a little different than just sitting in row 11, seat 11J and watching people declaim.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that is part of the joy of those particular like retro shows, stuff like Doctor Who, stuff like The Prisoner, that you start in a place that is very pulpy, very adventure, very fun, pew laser guns, all of that stuff. But then you move through that to a place that is quite genuine. And that is genuinely asking questions about like the nature of your own humanity, which is one of the fundamental questions of art, but particularly science fiction, is that we push these kind of exciting genre tropes to their extremes to see how people react under extremes, and to put these kind of thought experiments into action to see what human responses come in these circumstances. And so I think my hope is that by having these slightly mysterious and weird interactions on the website with this being that's sort of asking you questions and getting you to sort of respond in kind of abstract ways, you start to, and I think it was you who said this, Sean, when we were kind of figuring out how to do this, and you were helping me think about it, the audience become kind of psychologically engaged, and they start to ask questions of themselves, and they start to put together a story about their own lives based on this alien artifact being like, pick which of these 4 images represents you. And one of the images is a black hole, one is the moon, one is the sun, and one is a flock of birds. The idea being that like the alien artifact doesn't understand people. It doesn't really get humans. But in its sort of wild questioning, the humans it's talking to start to understand themselves. And that's the journey that the characters in the show go on. And it's hopefully a journey that the audience gets to go on as well. And that hopefully by the end of the show, they've started to think a little bit about questions of identity, questions of the self, and questions of like, well, what is it that makes you you? What is it that makes you a man or a woman or a friend or a lover or a professional or a member of a team? And how concrete are those things, and how changeable are those things?
I think it sounds fascinating, and I'm excited that the website's now live. I remember being really intrigued when we were talking about it, and I can't wait to actually go check it out. I will put myself down as Team Flock of Birds, by the way, right here.
Great.
So.
I hope that at one point you'll get a chance to explain to the artifact why.
So, because culture is like this, when I look up at the Zoom screen, what I see are the faces of 5 dudes. But in fact, we are also joined by Monique, who's the designer, and it would be great for her to say something, which will move her in Zoom over to the bits where we can see her, and maybe talk a little bit about the design aesthetic of the show. I'd be really interested to hear sort of where you started, Monique, and how your initial understanding changed, or what you used as references, or even how you went about sort of assembling a look and a style.
Yeah, absolutely. The show, like getting the first few scenes of the script and talking to Pierce was really excited because I like to say I was a nerd, but let's just be honest, still am. I've always been really interested in sci-fi. So what's really cool about this show is that you can use your past knowledge of so many different sci-fi films and culture that you might. But what was really interesting about this show is it's quite dark, but it's actually quite playful at the same time. So the first challenge in terms of design was finding how and where this meeting can happen. Because, you can see a really playful, fun show that's really funny, but there was also these really darker references that Piers shared with us, particularly Tarkovsky's, can't say it, Stalker. So when I watched that, I kind of got a bit more of a feel for this Earth, this world that we were exploring isn't really like our own. It's like an alternate version of our world in the past as well. So the challenge was finding how, yes, this playfulness and this darkness can be either mirrored or meeting in the middle. And that's where the talking about, in the script, there's a lot of chat about duplicates and duplication. And that's where the idea of binaries and black and white and color kind of developed from. So one probably really obvious way that this shows up in the design is that everything that's on the Earth is in black and white. So this way we're talking about duplication, we're talking about so many things, but it's also Earth is quite a dreary place. And it's not until we get to the moon that we see everything in color, and we realize that everything's actually really bright, everything's actually really fantastical. And when we return to the Earth, it's again this much darker space. So I know that some of the inspiration for Earth was we were thinking about what represents human toxicity, basically, and we came up with Los Angeles.
Hey, my hometown.
So that's where kind of this was. Sorry. Well, we just kind of thought about hearing stories of not many people walk around in Los Angeles. It also has a lot of mid-century architecture and a lot dry, more desolate landscapes. So that's where inspiration for the Earth has come from. And then, when we get to the moon, it's completely different. But another really interesting thing about this world that we've developed that came out from that is that characters in the laboratory, where the Earth scene is set, when they walk in, they have been outside. We don't know what the threat is, but there's something outside that means that they have to cover up a sense. So this was really interesting to develop this in isolation because we were all being sensorically deprived of touch, but we also have been developing this idea of sound being deprived and speech being deprived and sight being deprived, and what this represents. Maybe you're not heard, or maybe you can't listen to other people, or maybe you can't see the damage that you're doing. So this is really represented through props. this is a really props heavy show. Like Pierce was saying, we've got lots of laser guns and ray guns, and they're actually another way that we represent this human toxicity, because Archer, the really main masculine character, every time he visits the moon, he's more ramped up to conquer it, and he takes more and more laser guns with him every time. And so by the end, we see him like with all these laser guns all over him. But ultimately, this is a colonial story. This is what we're talking about. We're showing how these characters, they just want to conquer this artifact, the alien, and what happens when characters don't want to do that. So yeah, that's the design challenge there. It's been really, really fun. Not many, like not boxed in any way, because when it's sci-fi, you can literally do anything. So we literally did everything. Yeah, that's, I think, probably in a nutshell.
As we talked a little bit before we went live about the possibility of maybe seeing a picture or two. Do you have a picture or two you could share?
We can organize that, I believe. Share screen. So I thought maybe I could give you an example of, so this is like one of the design drafts of the Earth. So everything will be filmed in black and white. We've got really fun shapes, and the challenge with black and white is for costuming is that anything black and white will show up that way, but anything in between is grey. So that was quite tricky to like figure out, especially with the set as well, how we can make sure things don't blend in too much and that they pop out. So then I also share, should I give away the color or do I leave it?
I think it's in the poster, so I think you can probably give it away.
Okay, great. All right, let's do it. Sorry, Zoom's there's my, here we go. Let me share this as well. Oh, there it is. Sorry, guys.
It's all right. You're building suspense. It's important.
Here we go. So when we get to the Earth, we actually reveal that all the colors, the costumes that they were wearing on Earth, extremely colorful. And this it says a lot about some of the characters want to stay on the moon. Some of them want to go back to Earth because they don't think it's all that bad. But it also reveals how they use the costumes. So whether they take it off or whether they keep it on is also saying a lot about the person that they're becoming and their character's trajectory. So another really cool thing about the costumes is that all the colors were selected from actual 1960s retro sci-fi comic books. And this other idea of comic books kind of representing the ideal of everything. And so selecting colors and tones from that was really important to us to kind of get this really fun retrofuturistic world. And that's what you end up with, basically. Some really fun, like honestly, the moon is, I'd go there. It looks like a great fun place.
I get such a strong sense of, well, The Prisoner is a good reference, The Avengers, that kind of late 60s combination of, as you say, the funny and the creepy at the same time. Those are great, Monique. Really enjoyable.
That's why you've got to log on and watch the show. That's where you do the website. It's
what was that website URL?
I think it might have been www.project-eclipse.com.
That's it.
Sorry,
sounded
Tom,
familiar.
you cut out. What was that?
It was www.project-eclipse.com.
We just linked that in the chat for those who don't want to try and remember that and type that out as well. For those who are like me and like to add extra bits and pieces into things they hear.
So, if I'm correct, Pierce, in something I recall you saying, that this is a long, strange road for you, because did you not say that your career in performance started with, I am doing avant-garde opera. Why is no one listening? And here you are with lasers and comic books.
I think the important thing is that no middle sliders is an important policy to take into the world. You know, when you create a character in a video game and you can make the head like really big or really small, but if you're in the middle, then it looks normal. No, never that in my life. It's always like my approach to art is do the most extreme thing in any possible direction. So the stuff that I like is either extremely highbrow, like avant-garde opera, or extremely lowbrow, like, you know, Legends of Tomorrow, a DC comic book series about a time-traveling bisexual and her merry band of friends. And I think that all of the art that I've made has tended to fall into one of those two categories. And yeah, my main game is being a sort of librettist and theatre maker in avant-garde opera, which is, you know, it's a niche. It's a niche. I like to think I'm apparently the most performed avant-garde opera librettist in Australia. It's a small field.
Nice.
There's one other person in that field, and she is my arch nemesis. And if she makes one more opera, then she'll beat me, and then I have to make another one. And so we're just sort of racing each other.
So I see how you turned that into a comic book.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. My Moriarty, my Loki. Yeah, and you know, that's a form that allows me to do very strange things with language, that allows me to do very strange things with like shapes on stage, to create experiences that are purely kind of sensory and very intellectual and very cerebral, and that take you to strange places. But not a lot of people go to those. You'd be shocked to discover that when people are looking for a fun date night, it's a small number of people that are like, let's go and see Pierce's latest concoction in a converted railway workshop, in which none of the music will be consonant. It will all be dissonant. It will be difficult to listen to. It will be difficult to look at. And then when it ends, you will generally feel bad about yourself, your choices, and the world at large. So when given my druthers by NIDA to do whatever I wanted, I was like, well, time to be wildly indulgent and do the other thing I like, which is science fiction. Much to my dismay, it turns out that you ended the genre about 20 years ago. So I'm clearly running on fumes here.
Oh, that's all right. There's always pastiche.
Exactly, which is kind of what we're doing. And honestly, where I think Lunacy comes from, where a lot of my interest in kind of sci-fi writing comes from, is an attempt to understand why I like this stuff, an attempt to understand why, as a boy, I kind of grew up being obsessed with these things, why I wanted to go to the moon, why I wanted a laser gun. And part of it is aesthetic, part of it is kind of the glory of witnessing this stuff. But then part of it, and what this show in particular is about, is starting with the premise that all of this stuff is awesome and great and cool, and then kind of pulling that apart across the course of the story and asking like, well, why when you meet an alien is your first instinct like, I need my laser gun so I can shoot it? Why, when presented with another land, is our instinct to conquer it? And I think, you know, a lot of the fundamental premises of the kind of retro science fiction that I grew up loving, people like Robert Heinlein, like there's some really nasty stuff in there. There's some really retrograde ideology in a lot of that old stuff that I just sort of inhaled when I was growing up. And part of this is me perhaps trying to perform a mini exorcism on myself and be like, why do I love this stuff? Are there parts of it that are salvageable? Are there parts of it that we sort of need to jettison as we sort of build a different future? So yeah, as you can see, I've found a way to make the fun thing intellectual. This is my eternal problem. But rest assured, there is at least one fight scene in the show, which is very, very good, actually.
I think, by the way, right there for the fight scene, when people asked me years ago what I wanted to write when I was mostly writing novels, I said, I want to write meaning of life thrillers that ask important questions about the human condition, but don't skimp on sword fights. So that statement sounds very, very close to where you come from.
Yeah.
but I read Tolkien instead of Heinlein. I think I mentioned to you that I was in the odd position when I was just starting out as a writer. I was sort of taken bemusedly under the wing of a science fiction writer named William Gibson, who lived in my town and sort of every 6 months would invite me over to his house and dispense avuncular wisdom, to his own great surprise. I use the word advisedly because at one point I sort of thanked him for kind of being nice to me and helping me out. And he said, "Oh no, don't mention it. It makes me feel avuncular." But Gibson said that one of the drivers for him writing science fiction was that he would read Heinlein novels and the Space Marines would, be on their way into space, and on their way they would encounter riffraff from the town and beat the crap out of them to keep things in line. And he said, I could just never get away from the idea that I knew which one of those two I would be. I would always be the riffraff getting the crap kicked out of him, not the Space Marines. And so a lot of his approach to science fiction, came from that place. For those, we've ended up in a very sci-fi place. So Gibson is traditionally awarded the medal as the defining voice of a genre called cyberpunk, the shorthand for which is usually high-tech, low life. So when you went and saw The Matrix, if you did, whether or not you knew it, you were looking at a William Gibson inspired world. So all that stuff goes back to him. And he was a kid who grew up basically in District 12. Right? He's from nowhere, somewhere in Appalachia, without a lot of money. And he once said, his own success surprised no one more than it surprised him. He always assumed that science fiction was created, as he said, by eccentric old men living in trailer homes and eating cat food. And he loved them, and it was his fondest wish to somehow end up in the same place. This is probably slightly misleading, since he was also the only science fiction writer of the 80s who knew a lot about Italian men's shoes. He had that sort of eye for fashion and brand that seems very ahead of its time now, predicting the world that we honestly live in, mostly as culturally, if not in terms of its tech. As a fun point for those who've been following the Roundabout Chronicles, Pierce is responsible for this whole play. Pierce reached out and wrote me a note saying, "Hey, would you like to come talk to my class?" And that's in fact how I even knew that NIDA existed. And out of that initial conversation came the chance to write Roundabout, and the chance to have it performed all started because Pierce knew about a project I had built years and years and years ago, along with some friends, called I Love Bees. Is it something that you read about? Were you a player? What was your relationship?
I was sort of like a very outer circle player, because I would post on the forums a little bit, but I would mainly just listen to the radio drama side of things, and go to the website and see what was evolving.
Right.
I came into it a little bit late, and then was just this is the best thing that I've ever seen. and it was a work that felt genuinely new in a lot of ways. I had not seen anything like it before, and that was really exciting. And then so all of this is my fault. Bensley and Daniel, you've been trapped in these little boxes.
To blame for sure.
Exactly. But Sean also has to blame me for getting up at 3 a.m. to do the show. So I've got a lot to answer for. But yes, when the world went into lockdown and I teach this devising class at NIDA, And then it rapidly transitioned to being an online class, and an online class about digital storytelling. So like, what kind of stories can we make on these platforms? What kind of stories can we make in isolation? And I was talking to another teacher, and they sent me a big list of all these people who they thought were cool, who could teach in that field. And Sean's name was on it. And I was like, oh, I know Sean's work. Do you know him? And that teacher said, oh, no, we could never get Sean. He's far too big a deal. I don't have a contact for him. And so I Googled Sean Stewart, and I went to his website, and his email is there. And I emailed him, and he wrote back in about 45 minutes and was like, I'd love to. So the lesson is always email your heroes, because they might turn out to be great. It's you and Noam Chomsky, good at responding to email.
And that has somehow led to us all sitting here on the most chaotic stream that I have ever seen. Everyone's just asking Tom in the chat where they've left things. Tom, have you seen the other MediaNet boxes? Have you seen?
They're not. They weren't in the truck. I didn't. The truck. We haven't got them.
So, when do you start performing the show? When's your live stream? Or is this information by any chance at www.project-eclipse.com?
That it would be. If you went to the broadcast tab, it's got all that information for you.
But we can also tell you, we are broadcasting in the same week that you are. So I would recommend you watch Roundabout one night, and you watch Lunacy the next night for a nice little science fiction double feature, as the song goes. We are Tuesday, August the 4th to Sunday, August the 9th. Normally we're doing evenings, 9 p.m. Sydney time, but we also have some matinees in there. There's an 11 a.m. Sydney time and a 1 p.m. Sydney time, which will hopefully be much more bearable for those in other time zones.
The 11 a.m. should line up directly to 6 p.m.
6 p.m. in LA?
In LA.
Or the barren post-apocalyptic world of Lunacy, as I like to think of it.
Yeah. The dead zone, we call it.
The dead zone. 9 o'clock in New York. So that would be great. I'd really enjoy seeing the shows. I thought, so the I Love Bees project, which is the one you were talking about earlier, for those who don't know, was, among other things, a big part of it was a 6-hour-long radio drama that was broadcast in 45-second chunks over payphones all over the world. And the years between 2004 and now have not been kind to payphones, what with the arrival of everybody having a phone on their own actual body, and also the increasing use of payphones as a method for conducting drug transactions. But I was in, over the weekend, I was in Yosemite National Park, one of the world's great physical spaces. And there, in the shadow of Half Dome, is one of the last payphones on the planet. So if we ever run I Love Bees reunion, we'll definitely be broadcasting parts of the story to Glacier Point in Yosemite National Park. I took a picture of it so that I could show it to all the I Love Bees players and say, you're going to need to level up to get to this.
I was going to say, do you need to hike to get to the phone?
I think ideally we should make them come up from the valley floor.
Yeah.
It's basically a 1.5 miles straight up. So, Tom, as the creative technologist on the project, what has been the biggest challenge for you in making Lunacy?
My job has kind of evolved to what it originally began. There's like the website component of it, which is www.project-eclipse.com, which you can check out right now. And the other part of it has been taking a show from NIDA and putting it into a warehouse out a couple of suburbs away. So there's a lot of working out how to put theatre on in a space that isn't designed for theatre, And also, NIDA is a place that has theatres in it. So why would you do theatre outside of the theatre? So it's kind of like tech support MacGyvering a lot of different things to make an outside broadcasty sort of system in a warehouse, which has been a challenge.
Yes. I think.
And Tom, you're in the control room right now, if I'm not wrong.
I am, yeah. So
it sort of looks like one of those fake Zoom backgrounds, but it is real.
Yeah, it's real. There's lots of screens with color bars, which will hopefully not have color bars in about 2 weeks' time, because there is more to the show than color bars. But yeah, it's all happening out here. Sets are being built, fences have been demolished, neighbors' cars have been scratched. It's all good.
We take no responsibility. That didn't happen.
They parked in front of our loading dock door. The truck just happened to welcome them a little bit too much.
It's a love tap. It's a love tap.
Before we started the stream, we were in our regular breakfast club.
I was going to do this for you, Bensley.
Were you?
I was going to say, in the stream immediately before this, the Zoom call immediately before this, Bensley and Daniel were, I bet you anything, Tom's going to be shooting right in front of all the gear. So everyone just sees all the gear lined up.
All the gear that you've stolen that we can't have.
Look, I've got to have something to display so it makes it look like I actually do something on the production. Yeah, the technical manager of a show has now a stuffed dinosaur because I'm so good at my job.
Tom went to IKEA to buy some things and came back with 2 soft toys, as well as, I presume, other things that were actually bought. But all I saw were the soft toys. And so those soft toys have really worked their way up the ranks. They started in the mailroom, and now they're coming for my job.
So you people at home can become stuffed toy dinosaurs, hopes and dreams of becoming a technical manager of some crazy ass show in a warehouse. It's all open for you.
Yeah.
One of the recurring themes, we've had a lot of people drop by the stream to talk who work from very traditional formats. Like we just had the Pippa Hill, who's head of literary for the Royal Shakespeare Company, was on your last night, my this morning. But also a bunch of people who do very sort of modern work. A lot of tech-based stuff. We had the people from Marshmallow Laser Feast who design kind of immersive experiences using everything from projection mapping to lasers, drones, triggered and cued scent packs so that you smell things when you're supposed to be smelling them. The other day we had Steve Boyle from Epic Immersive, who turns whole city blocks into theatrical experiences. And one of the continuous themes, even from Pippa, who's in, the most classic traditional theater job in some ways you can imagine, was when we asked them, what do students at NIDA, what should they look to do? What is the move to make? They've all had an answer that is some form of make work. Just make work. Make it in a warehouse. Make it for pirate radio. Make it in your car. Make it at the mall. Make it at Fringe. Whatever it is, just Bob Dylan back used to say that he had a mystic belief in the power of just get a song on the radio. Anything can happen once you put a song on the radio. So one of the things that I want to sort of call out is building a space outside of theater is a really good skill set to have, I think, for where you are and where you're going and what the future of theater is. I am strongly of the belief that being able to put on a great show in a building called a theater is awesome. I think you would do well, you are doing well to be working on a show that is not in a place called a theater. Because I think increasing amounts of, I know a ton of people who have similar backgrounds or similar passions, and some work for Disney, some build escape rooms, some do immersive theater shows in the buildings that they have the space for after the office goes dark that occupies it during the day. Like increasingly, I think more and more of this kind of work is going to be done in these interesting found spaces, and the part of the point of having this live stream is that it's to make brackish water where audience and theater makers mingle. Brackish is like where salt water meets fresh water, right? I think theater is going to increasingly be like that. And I think the stuff you're doing on this show of going out and extending the world of your show into a warehouse, onto the web, into someone else's stream, that kind of opportunistic way of bringing a story to where people live rather than putting a story in your place and hoping people travel there. It's a good instinct. Have you gotten a chance to do that often, or is this unusual in for Monique and Tom? Is this an unusual show in that sense, of the ones you put on?
I don't know. Before coming to NIDA, I'd done a few bits and pieces that weren't theatre. So I guess taking stuff and putting it into random places is something I've done previously. But it's been nice to be in a position where you're a little bit higher up the food chain, having to make more decisions than what time is smoko. It's
a very important decision, Tom.
It is. It is almost smoko now.
Are you dissing my job?
No, not at all, Bensley. Not at all.
You better not be dissing my job.
And Monique, have you enjoyed the challenge of working on Lunacy?
I have loved it. It's really different particularly from a costume perspective, because normally, meeting the actors online, that was really interesting, because that interaction between a costume designer and an actor actually really informs the design. So having that interaction occurring through Zoom and through email was really, really interesting, and it really tested my kind of ability, I guess, to pick up on things about the person and how that could relate to the character. So that's something that I found really interesting. I've only ever worked on theatre productions and short films and TV series. So doing it this way was really interesting, but also really rewarding, because I also now know what things need to be brought up to be dealt with, like the most important. And those are the things that I was constantly reaching out to people to find out about. And then there was other things that I could do on my own. And so it's been really interesting finding, which bubbles went to the surface and which didn't. Yeah.
That's a really interesting answer. I'll ask Bensley and Daniel, while we're at it, has the process of the Digital Theater Festival been, what are the things that are most notably different about it than doing other productions you've done? Or this is not, I'm not looking for, it's been great working on this show, though I hope it has. But are there different challenges or ways of working that, for instance, Monique mentioned having to do stuff through Zoom.
Well, Sean, we won't give you the "it's been good working on the show" because it has been terrible. No, we obviously we've loved it. It's been great, and thank you, Pierce, for bringing Sean to us. It's obviously we wouldn't have it without you. But for I guess for me, I'll never be a true production stage manager now here at NIDA, so I won't know exactly what my role would normally do. But I guess the big change for us is the hierarchy. There just isn't a hierarchy. It's very much, at least in our production, it's very much a very fluid. Like, yes, there's a hierarchy as such, working in the background, but on the creative front, we all just seem to be, we're doing our best to put on the best production we can, and just loving it and enjoying it. And to be honest, if I didn't have to go into a theatre next production season to be assessed to pass my degree, I probably would never enter a theatre again and just continue doing stuff like this.
Old words. Someone's going to clip that.
No, please pass me. Please give me my degree.
Yeah, no, I think Bensley's right in terms of the hierarchy. Maybe it's a little bit hard to explain because I think NIDA has a very specific way of working, but the way the company kind of talks to each other is quite refreshing from our perspective in these kind of managerial technical roles. I guess the other thing, maybe this probably relates more to Bensley as he's managing right now, but just communication, Zoom, emails. I think it's a good exercise in, we're taught to communicate as managers, but really here it's incredibly obvious if someone misses something, like we miss an email and there's no stream, or a prop gets missed. You can't walk to the props corridor and just tap them on the shoulder and say, I made a mistake this morning. We need 19 laser guns instead of 18. So I don't know. That's been a good exercise for us. I think hopefully not too much of a headache for Bensley.
I mean, I got back, so story time. Jess and I went on a props run, and we were gone for about an hour. My emails were empty. I'd replied to everyone. I got back, and there was 35 emails waiting there for me to deal with. So, there's a lot of email communication, and I guess a big part for me, I know my company knows I'm quite chaotic as a project manager, and trying to get that chaos to come across in my emails. I actually try and make sure that there was the invitation to our production meetings. It was, well, howdy, welcome to it. Trying to keep the humor and all that when you're in an email is good, because to me that's one of the most important things. You've got to be having fun to be creative, in trying to get that to stay with the production. Not that our production's very hard to make laugh, but just keeping things like that floating around is kind of my biggest thing, the hardest thing to try and do while also get the information across.
I suppose the other thing, maybe Lunacy you guys can talk on this, because it's a digital season. I mean, I guess this is obvious, but in practice, you don't really. I mean, I certainly didn't understand the full implications of this. Like just the amount of video and the talks that you need to have surrounding content and streaming and formatting and that kind of thing is really changed it up, in terms of how people talk in production meetings and creative discussions, and but the audiovisual integration having such a by necessity needing to have such a heavy role in both design and the technical delivery, the set kind of. I don't know if that's kind of changed a lot of dynamics for you guys, but it's certainly interesting on Roundabout to working on video, being in discussions that normally in a theater show when you're projecting onto a wall you wouldn't be in.
Yeah, I think that ties back to that hierarchy thing that you two were both talking about, is that at training institutions like NIDA, when you're training for a form like theatre, which has a set hierarchy, which has a set bunch of roles, and those roles always fulfill the same thing within a place like the Sydney Theatre Company or Belvoir or whatever. And so you can come out of NIDA and you're like, I'm this kind of person, I do that job. Everyone has had to step out of their jobs on these shows. Everyone has had to kind of take on about 3 new jobs, or shift what they do, or design a bit more for film as opposed to theatre. I think definitely like the process has changed for everybody, the roles have changed for everybody. And I think in that regard, there's been something amazing that's come out of that, in that, my script wasn't finished until like 4 days before we started rehearsals. And so that meant that Moni and Adrienne, the set designer, like normally in theatre, you get the script, you spend a while with the director talking about design concepts, talking about what does this character look like, what's the vibe, what's our take on this Shakespeare. It's Richard II, but it's set on Mars. It's Hamlet, but it's set in underwater. And instead, what we got was this. Probably, I think I stressed Moni and Adrienne out no end, being like, there is a script, it's happening, it's coming. I kind of know what happens. I just haven't written the words yet. But what
loved it. I actually thought it was an amazing way to work, because I thought it was great how all the design could inform the script and the script could inform the design, but like it was more of like a conversation than a here it is kind of thing.
Yeah,
that was really cool.
Absolutely. And that's something that I really took away from it as well, is that like it meant that we'd have conversations and I would give them kind of conceptual stuff like, okay, there's an alien artifact on the moon. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what it feels like. And then Adrienne and Moni would be like, well, maybe it looks like this. Maybe it feels a bit like this. And we'd share references, and the ideas that they came up with would go into the next draft of the script. And so the actual writing process, like it meant that the designers more than anyone else were affecting the writing, were affecting the things that the characters did, because they'd have these ideas and they'd share these references that would shape a certain character's journey. And I think it's pretty common for people to, in theatre, devise with actors, but rarely do people devise with designers. Rarely do people devise with video designers, which we've kind of been having to do across this process. Absolutely, like Daniel was saying, thinking about how scenes might work, thinking about how conversations might work. Like my head of video is in the room, basically being a director of photography. And it makes you realize, like on films, like the director of the photography shapes the experience of the audience far more than anyone else, I would say, a lot of the time. Like they are directing the audience's eye, and where the audience's eye goes affects what the story is. And so those kind of conversations, it's a very different mode of collaboration. And I think it's one that I definitely prefer a lot to the conventional model of script that was written by some dead guy 400 years ago, director says some big concept, and everyone just executes that.
I laughed. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think there's also like an interesting thing that's happened, like, and then coming up with like the story, the way that the timeline of creating Lunacy has been interesting, because the script for the live part of the show came before like all the archive content. And so it's almost like writing a prequel. So we've got the show, and now we've got to create with the content that leads to other things to happen as well. So it's almost like the bit that the audience sees first was actually come up with last.
Yeah, and there was this kind of wild week about a fortnight ago where we were trying to create all this archive content. So the www.project-eclipse.com is what we're calling the archive. That's all the sort of backstory, all the amazing stuff where you're engaging with the artifact and learning about this world. We're calling it the Eclipse Archive, and that's the sort of in-universe name for it. And so having written the script that we could start rehearsing, we got to a place in rehearsals where I was like, great, we can sort of press pause on that for a bit. And every night I would write new material for the archive. And that would be, radio drama stuff, like video stuff, the characters making recordings of like, hey, it's 10 years before the play happens and I've just discovered the alien artifact for the first time. Or as you'll see when you go to the website, www.project-eclipse.com, a series of test missions before we get to the mission that we see in the live stream, all of which fail in various horrific ways. So it was sort of like working on a soap opera where each night I'd write a new scene for one of those missions and we'd come in and record it in the booth the next morning. And then that would get edited to get put up on the archive. So yeah, the process there, and Tom has been leading a lot of that writing as well, kind of shaping that experience. And so again, like Tom as creative technologist is also kind of a lead writer on that part of the project. And occasionally stuff that we've done there, those ideas have come from conversations with the actors about where they think their characters were before the show starts. And then sometimes stuff that we've come up with in the archive has then fed back into normal rehearsals about like, hey, I've actually now figured out where your character learned this piece of information and who they talked to come up with this idea that they're so proud of in the show itself. So there is this constant kind of quite odd back and forth, swimming back and forth between these different media forms. No, go on.
I was just going to say, there's also characters who exist in the archive alone. Like you won't interact unless you view the archive at www.project-eclipse.com. You won't know they even exist, and whether that's important to the live part of the show or not, that's something that you'll have to find out. But that whole, like you said, Piers, that whole process of writing new stuff and filling a universe with content, especially coming up with things to put on there, we had to find a point that we could say, okay, everything in Earth's history up until this point has happened. And so Pierce and I had a discussion about like the break-off point in which we break away from what would be considered history and then our history and our universe, basically. And so we're trying to put things into the archive that is not only serves the show, but serves the people viewing the show being able to place themselves in terms of what they know actually happened in real life, which has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and there are these really interesting kind of joining points and disjunction points. But yeah, there's a character that I wrote who is this, this beautiful character where we grabbed a first-year actor before she went back to America. She was an American exchange student, and I needed someone who can do an American accent. And I was like, oh, the American probably can. Her name's Jessie, and she was about to get on a plane, and I was like, hey, do you want to be in a NIDA show before you leave? And she was like, absolutely. And so I wrote, she's got this whole little arc that is solely through audio recordings that is going to track across the archive. So in some ways, she is maybe the main character of the archive, but doesn't appear in the show itself. But her arc closes in a way that sets up the arc of the kind of lead female character of the show that we then see. And if you have experienced one, you're going to get a whole arc. If you experience both, then you see how these things dovetail really nicely.
Well, that sounds beautiful. I laughed when you were saying that there wasn't even a finished script until 4 days before rehearsals.
It sounded oddly familiar.
Daniel, the script you're working from, what is it titled?
I believe it's Roundabout working script, July 8th. Is that the one we're currently on?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Maybe it's July 10th.
Oh, so, by which I mean there was not a script that had an ending. I still haven't figured out what the last speech of the main character is. It's a bit of a placeholder. We'll get it.
Yeah, can I ask, because Tom is obviously flexing with his system and how big he can bloody make it, how many pages is your script?
I think it's 65 big old pages.
Is that all?
How long is Sean's?
328 or something like that.
Okay, I see I've been outclassed. I will shrink and become a corn cob.
Only 90 pages or so are actually done per show, but obviously ours is multiple choice endings.
Yes.
Yeah.
But hang on, how many
They
laser
do
guns?
have a whole.
What was that, Monique?
How many laser guns do you have, though?
Look,
Well, Sean, he'll add some. We'll get on it.
Yeah, like
How many? No, the question is, how many do you have?
because we'll up that.
that and one more.
We
Laser
have
guns.
we have 8, and the way that we have 8 is that we needed like at least 2. We needed 1 for each of these 2 characters, and the designers came up with all of these amazing designs, and I was like, these are all amazing. Let's do this one and that one, and then those are my favorites. And then I think that those designs made their way to props, and the prop students are all wonderful makers and rarely get the chance to build guns. And then it seems like every single prop student in the building was like, I'll make a gun. I'll make a gun. And some of the teachers were like, I'll make a gun. And then Monique came to me.
They should move to America, man. It's the place for them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because they work in theater. So, like, I guess they get to make swords for the Shakespeares, but they rarely get to make, firearms. And especially firearms that go pew, pew, pew and, like, light up.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
And then Monique came to me and was like, Pierce, they've, you know how you picked the 2 best guns and you said that was sufficient? They've made all of them. They've made every single possible design.
It's pretty exciting though. So we've got like AK-40, whatever, I don't know what guns are, but the big ones. We've got like big laser guns and we've got like little ones. So yeah, they all make cute little sounds or like less cute sounds and light up and do things. It's pretty exciting.
Mel has put a throwback in the comments. Remember last year when a student made a real taser while trying to make a modified one?
Yes.
That is
Mar
our
outside.
prop students.
Hijinks ensue.
No.
Can we have a fake laser next to the we're like down the corridor of props? We hear, ow! Someone's been tasered.
Oh my God.
Good
As it
times, good times.
It sounds amazing. I can't wait to go check it out. I think you're right that our 2 shows would make a hell of a fun double feature, and at the cost cannot beat the value. So let's encourage everybody to go to, now what was it? www.projecteclipse.com.
I'll just spam that in the chat a few times. Yep, that should do it.
And it's been such a pleasure sort of working side by side with you. And I know my team has enjoyed. To be slightly more serious for 1 second, there are a hell of a lot of challenges in taking like a building that puts on, Romeo and Juliet in doublet and hose suddenly having to stream live with latency and lag and like the number of things that on the technical side have had to be overcome.
Just Australian internet.
Bensley and Daniel and Tom and a bunch of people across several different productions have been fiercely sharing information to try to make all these shows happen, and in a way that I think has been really admirable and great. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. And I think we're going to look forward to seeing your show. And I hope, of course, you'll find a little time to see ours. And,
of course. Thank you for having us, and break a leg for the rest of your rehearsals.
Thank you.
Will do.
All right, we'll wrap it up there, everyone. Thank you for watching, as always. Thank you for Pierce, Moni, Daniel, Tom, and Sean for joining us on another stream. Check out Lunacy. We both open on the same night, Tuesday, the 4th of August, which is Monday, the 3rd of August, if you're in LA. And hopefully we'll see you all there. And there is also another 4 productions going on at the same time as ours. The project manager of 6 was in our chat, and I call her out to contact me so we can have her on. But until then, we'll see you all tomorrow with another Royal Shakespeare, if I'm correct, Sean.
It's Thursday for the Royal Shakespeare.
Yep, which is tomorrow for us.
Yeah, we've got Stephen Brimston Lewis on tomorrow.
Yeah,
Great.
so he's director of design for the Royal Shakespeare. So, Monique, like, show up, because don't you want to know what that guy's doing?
Yeah.
Plus, he's delightful and charming.
He is. Yep. Everyone Sean's had on with us has been amazing to speak to. They've all been so lovely. But anyway, we will catch you all later. See you, everyone. Have a good day.
Okay.
Thank you for
10
having
o'clock
us. See you
Thursday
later.
night for Stephen Rimson Lewis. And do it one more time for me.
Oh, I take my jumper off. It's not helping. Omega switch pat. Install. Whoa. I'm Sam.
Sam. Sam.
Whoa, dude, I'm in her yurt.
No. No, no, no.
I'm in her everything.
Good. This is art right here. The thing is, it's not no. It's not no. It's now.
Anyway, there were these people there watching us. And they were, watching the stream and talking about us.
No, no, no.
No.
Are you sure they said that, or is that just something you wanted to get off your chest?
N-A-O-U.
Okay, well, that's a bit rude.
A-U.
No, oh hell. I'm Pat.
That's pretty good, right?
That's the best thing I've ever seen you do, Lee.
That was great.
Anyway, there were these people there watching us. And they were, watching the stream and talking about us.
What did they say?
Oh, dude, just like